Most cross-cultural relationships don't fail because of conflict. They fail because of politeness. Because somewhere along the way, we decided that keeping the peace is far more important than telling the truth. Or, more precisely, that adapting to power's version of the truth was the price for staying connected. Because it is simply impolite to disrupt the comfort of the system. So we just play the role that we were given. Some of us translate, refine, and edit ourselves in real time, and the others accept that version as reality. Not because anyone involved is actually confused, but because everyone understands the cost of clarity. And often, the more functional the relationship looks, the more disciplined the silence becomes. Because now you have something to actually protect. An image, a narrative, a version of the relationship that only works if nobody names what's actually happening. Not just inside the relationship, but how the system is shaping it. So the foundation actually becomes carefulness, not honesty, but carefulness. And once you start managing your truth to maintain the relationship, you are no longer in a relationship, you're in a system. And systems do not ask you to be real, they ask you to behave. And the person who does the most behaving is almost always the person with the least power. Guys, if you have not already, go ahead, subscribe to my channel, and let's get into my notes on what dooms cross-cultural relationships.
Say, you know, can we all get along?
We've been trained to believe that the goal, especially in cross-cultural relationships, is to get along. But getting along is not neutral. It sounds like peace, like two equal sides meeting in the middle to get along. But that only really works if both sides are truly equal. And they're not. So getting along starts to become something else. It becomes silence. It's silence when you know something is off and you just choose not to disrupt anything. Because disruption can have consequences, especially when what you are disrupting is more than just a moment and it's hierarchy. So instead, you just manage yourself around whatever is happening. And then the real question should be, who has to get along? Who gets rewarded for becoming fluent in emotional diplomacy? Who gets labeled chill for making themselves smaller? Because a lot of times when people say you're easy to be around, it often means that you have learned to make your reality less inconvenient. Because politeness in cross-cultural spaces is rarely about respect. It's about keeping certain truths out of the room. So the structure of the relationship never has to change. And the moment you break that, the moment you stop performing harmony, then something shifts. We need to stop pretending that integration is mutual. And that's where it would start. We talk about everything like it's a 50-50 exchange, like two cultures just meeting in the middle. But that logic ignores power. It ignores history. It ignores the fact that not all identities move through the world in the same way. Like biracial identity, it is not a neutral split. A black and white experience is not the same as an Asian and Mexican experience, but we flatten it so we do not have to confront what shapes those differences. And it's power. So when white people enter relationships, any relationship with a racialized partner and frame it as equal, what's being erased is that equality does not exist outside of that relationship. And the person who realizes that first is never the person with the power, because the tone has already been set. One culture sets it, the other learns how to move inside of it. Before you even enter in these relationships, both of you come from a perspective where you have already learned what is acceptable, what is too much, what needs to be translated. Yes, white people know what needs to be translated for them, and they expect it. As well as people in racialized and marginalized bodies understand that some things have to be hidden entirely. And if you do that well enough, you get rewarded, you get access, proximity, and stability. you get to stay. But of course, staying has conditions. You don't disrupt the system that lets you stay. I have had too many conversations with marginalized people in relationships with white folks, and they will often tell the truth to other people of color privately, but never say it in the relationship itself. And there are white people in these relationships that believe there are no boundaries. They believe they have made themselves safe. But in honesty, that kind of access, that kind of full transparency is extremely rare because there is no reward for certain levels of honesty in polite society. We like to pretend that silence is neutral. It is not. Silence is enforcement, especially when one person has more room to speak than another. Because what we call passive is often just power that doesn't need to be announced. Who gets to be direct without being labeled as aggressive? Who gets to misunderstand you without being corrected? Who gets to stay comfortable while you do all of the emotional labor to keep things peaceful? That is not personality, that is structure. And silence protects it. Because as long as things are fine, nothing gets examined, nothing gets named, so nothing changes. And silence also creates the perfect excuse. If you don't know, what can you do? And that is convenient because sometimes not knowing is the comfort. And the part that people are completely afraid of is radical honesty. And that doesn't mean you get to be cruel or just saying whatever you want without any accountability. It is simply about not being willing to translate your reality for someone else's comfort. It's being able to say and being heard when you tell someone, this is what it feels like from where I stand, without editing yourself to preserve their identity. Because polite communication is designed to protect how people see themselves, not to reveal what is true. So when you tell your truth, it doesn't just disrupt the moment, it disrupts identity. And that's why it feels like conflict, but it's not conflict, it's exposure. And exposure feels like violence for people who have never had to question their position inside of the system. And this is the irony. We talk about fragility like it's abstract. It is not. You see it in what can be said and who can say it. Racist rhetoric can exist publicly, be debated, defended, normalized. But the people affected by it, they are expected to be measured, reasonable, polite, even in their own pain. What happened with Michael B. Jordan and the whole thing with the BBC leaving in the N word from a man with Tourette's. Everyone expected the people injured by this to be the ones who were reasonable, polite, reassuring in their own pain. And this is where most relationships break. Because once you put the truth on the table, you can't go back. Race entered the room or gender entered the room, power is in the room. And suddenly the relationship goes from being emotional to political. And that's where people panic because they do not want love to require analysis. They don't want connection to come with accountability. But in reality, if your relationship cannot survive the truth, it was never stable. It was just quiet. And quiet is not the same thing as safe because only one of you are. Real partnerships, real cross-cultural alliances are not built on comfort. They're built on capacity. Capacity to hear something that might destabilize you, destabilize your identity, and you not collapse. The capacity to sit in your own discomfort without demanding it be softened. The capacity to understand that love without truth is only performance. The truth that everyone wants to avoid. Radical honesty will cost you relationships because not everyone wants the truth. Some people want the version of you that fits in their world without forcing them to change. You have to decide if that is the version of you worth protecting. Because the other side of that loss is a type of a relationship that most people can't imagine ever experiencing. one that you do not have to shrink yourself to stay, where you do not have to translate to be understood, where truth does not threaten the connection but defines it. White people want to believe that they enter relationships on equal footing because acknowledging the imbalance creates responsibility. And responsibility is much heavier than awareness. It's not knowing that's uncomfortable, it's what knowing demands. Politeness might keep you in a relationship, but the truth will tell you what that relationship actually is. Guys, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I look forward to the discussion with you in the comments, so ciao ciao for now.